And one. Well, hey, Dave Molenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you today. Love starting with a question, and I'm going to do that again today. And this one is kind of more of a challenge. And so the question is it time to elevate your top line revenue by double digits? And I'm like, man, that's kind of a bold statement. And I happened to find it on this individual's LinkedIn profile. And I was like, man, I love that. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Barbara Spector. How are you today?
Oh, I couldn't be better, Dave. I'm so glad to be here.
That's awesome. You are a CEO and president at Smart Moves. So tell us, what is Smart Moves?
Well, if you think about that expression that's used all the time, boy, that was such a smart move that they did or that they made. We named our company Smart Moves because we help corporations more often than not in the SMB space to make really smart decisions whenever it comes to hiring, developing, and keeping top talent. And these days, it's specifically in the sales arena. So we
Wow,
work
that's
with
awesome.
sales organizations to help them make really smart decisions.
Sales is such a fun word to talk about, but boy, it sure can be a swear word to a lot of people, isn't it? Have you been in sales training, the sales world your whole life?
Just about, just about. I think after I got divorced the first time and I decided to be self-sufficient and rather than relying on alimony to survive on,
Sure.
I decided to get into sales.
That's awesome. And so, Smart Moves helps teams, and so sales teams and with sales training and things like that. And I love the fact that you are interested in double-digit growth. And so, if somebody was interested, so right off the bat, if somebody said, yes, you know what, Barb, I'm interested in double-digit growth, what's kind of the next step after someone has that interest?
Very good. So what we do is we don't just dive into some type of training or coaching system. We need to take a deep dive into what are the gaps, what are the strengths of an entire sales organization. So it's not just the salespeople, it's the sales managers, and it's also the sales leaders, VPs, directors, like that. Because we want to know what is the root cause of the problems that they're having that are keeping them from double digit growth. And what most organizations look at, because they don't have any other means of doing it, is they just look at the symptoms. So, for instance, if an organization doesn't have a very strong win rate, their win rate's at let's say 20%, and they're just going out of their mind, they're thinking, well, it must be that our salespeople don't know how to close.
Mm.
Well, the truth of the matter is that that's just a superficial symptom. What we do is we help them find out what the real cause of that is. And when I did this with one organization not too long ago, what they discovered is that we do an analysis of the whole sales team basically.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what they discovered was going on for the salespeople in particular was that they weren't reaching decision makers. They were
Mm,
talking to another level below the economic buyer. All right. Well, how can you
wow.
ever close a deal? How can you
Yeah.
close anything if you're not talking to the right decision maker? And so there were a couple of other things. You want me to
Yeah.
describe those? I can, or we can move
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I'd love to. Yeah. Well, so the question on that one, real quick, though, Barb, is that how did you? I mean, that's brilliant that you were able to find that they weren't talking to the decision makers. And I'm just curious because in sales in general, salespeople tend to be pretty to themselves as far as they don't want you to see behind the curtain, so to speak. I mean, how did you get people to open up to you? Because to me, that's brilliant just in itself on how you did that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, we actually don't talk to them, but instead we have them fill out a 45-minute online questionnaire.
Okay.
So we're out of the picture, and the types of questions we're asking um, are obtuse, I would say, right? They
Okay.
don't just point to, do you talk to decision makers? Right? It's way more subtle than that. And it's a
Sure.
series of questions, for example, for that one arena. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's we do an online use an online questionnaire, and it gives us, oh gosh, about 166 different data points,
Mm,
everything in the way of sales competency, mindset,
Sure.
sales leadership, like that.
Wow. And we do some work with DISC and you do as well. And so we're both familiar with assessments. And it's interesting because I get asked that question a lot, like, can I cheat the system? I
Mm.
mean, with 166 data points, it's pretty hard, I would guess. Number one, I don't know why people want to cheat the system other than to make themselves maybe look better than they are. But do you get people resisting assessments and science when it comes to this very much, or are most people open to this at this point?
We're seeing about like an 8% drop off rate, which is nothing. And when we
Okay,
do this with an existing sales team, there's virtually no drop off because the company is saying to them, hey, we're trying to improve our overall effectiveness in the marketplace. We're trying to improve our
sure.
top line revenue, right? We need your help, right? So
Yeah,
there's no angst in terms of, oh my God, what are they going to find out about me?
yeah,
And we also can tell if somebody answers honestly or not.
sure. Well, in today's world, it's so easy to blame everybody else, right? If you could blame the customer, you could blame the government, you could blame your company, you could blame your team, you can blame your coach. I mean, you can just pretty much blame anything. So, do you find that a lot at the beginning that people tend to deflect that this isn't really my problem? This is an outside of my team problem, or by the time people come to you, are they pretty much resolved to the fact that this is a team problem that we need to deal with?
Well, usually the CEO knows it's a team problem that they need to deal with, but we're finding that the rest of the group, particularly the salespeople and the sales management level, they're terrible excuse makers. They're always
Yeah,
blaming. They're always pointing the finger out there, always,
right.
and they
Yep,
don't even know they're doing it. They
yep.
don't even know they're doing it.
That's funny. And my next book I'm working on is on business blind spots. And so, like what you just said, is people don't even know they're doing it. So I try to give people get out of jail free cards, Barb, if they really truly don't know. But once you've been exposed to it, you kind of have to lose that excuse, right?
Yep.
Um, so when you have people that don't know they're doing it, are they still resistant once someone starts to share that, or do they start to see the value that, smart moves would bring into this type of situation?
They do, and because let me give you an example of a something sort of thing that a salesperson is blaming, but they don't even know that they're doing it. It's like, let's imagine that they've gone out on a call and they come back and their manager says to them, "So how'd it go?" I'm being very general here,
Sure. Yeah.
and he goes, "Well, I think we're gonna get the deal, but the truth is that they have two competitors coming in after us, and I didn't know that, right?"
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
for me, I would say, well, how come you didn't ask that question before you got there?
Right.
Right. So that's the subtlety that I'm talking about. That they think it's cool that, or they didn't, that it's perfectly natural that oops, after the fact, we have two competitors coming in. Well, you should have
Yeah.
known that ahead of time. So
No.
if they knew it ahead of time, the finger would be pointing here and they'd be going, I
Sure.
forgot to ask, instead of
No.
saying, the problem is them. They had two competitors.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and I know early in my career, hope was my sales strategy, I hope
Hope.
I'm gonna get this one. I hope I'm gonna get this one. Oh, that one looks really good, right? I mean, and that's just crazy how often we hear that. So, but do you see like sales growth? Are the leaders as much to blame in limiting sales growth as the sales team generally when you get involved?
Absolutely.
Okay. So
Absolutely.
how do you
And
look
it's
at
a
both
trickle
of
down
those?
effect. Sorry, it's
Yeah,
a
I'm just
trickle down
curious.
effect.
Yeah, I'm just curious how you look at both of those. I look at them as buckets, right? There's a big sales team, and then there's the leadership. Do they each kind of have their own assessment, or do they each have their own responsibilities from your end?
Yeah, they have, well, in terms of the work we do, they have their own assessment, but a lot of the
Okay,
hidden mindsets that we measure, the sales leaders have them, the sales managers have them, and the salespeople have them. For example, a tremendous number of salespeople and sales managers and sales leaders have a real need to be loved and liked. We call it a need for approval.
yep,
And it's been embedded ever since they were kids. right? They had to please their parents, then in other ways they'd get punished. They had to please their teachers, otherwise they'd get a slap on the wrist or whatever would happen, depending on your religion, I guess.
Right. Yep.
Right. And so that it becomes, inherited almost inside of them as a ground of being. And so if a manager or a leader is going to let his people or her people get away with using excuses or get away with not doing what there is expected, well, guess what? Then the same thing's going to hold true for the salespeople. So it's just this trickle down effect.
Yeah. And why in the world is there this misnomer that good salespeople make good sales
Oh,
managers?
please don't even get me started on that one.
Oh my God, where did that come from, Barb? I have
Oh,
no
Lord.
clue where that came from, but that's so odd. I mean, especially because, you also work with the team side, and I loved what you were talking about, how you can make smarter people decisions. So, there's kind of two things going on here. We want to increase our sales. It just so happens that it's not like you can just turn the production up on the machine out in the shop to make more pieces. This is a human being, so you
Right.
really have to look at this from that perspective. So, do most CEOs that you work with, are they familiar or aware of that concept that it's sales are by a person as opposed to by a machine? Have you talked about that much with people? I'm just curious.
No, that hasn't shown up all that much. I mean, I think that the bigger problem with CEOs is that they're two steps removed from their sales organization, so that they're basically not aware of what the issues are that are keeping them from growing as effectively or as much as they would like. I don't think they
Gotcha.
see it as a machine, though.
Okay. So what are some strategies that you use to help them with get that growth mindset? If a leader is not growth mindseted, if that's a word, how do you get them into that growth mindset? What are some things that you do from a strategy perspective?
Well, the first thing that comes up for me to answer that question is we can discover what their hidden and limited mindsets are. Because if we can't measure it, you can't fix it. All right.
Okay.
I
Sure.
love that expression. If you can't measure it, you can't fix it. So in the tools that we work with in this analysis that we do and this questionnaire, we're asking them questions around their mindset, right? Again, not obvious, right? And we can see what's going on. So if you can bring to someone's attention first and foremost, as long as they're vulnerable enough and willing
Mhm.
enough to look at
Yeah.
the facts and not get defensive, first thing is it would just bring up to their awareness what's going on. And if we can get them to go, oh, I didn't even know that was going on for me, I didn't even
Yeah.
realize I was thinking like that, it's a huge myth buster. It's the way I like to
Sure.
think. Yeah, and it gets the ball rolling. And then the next piece of it is to actually get them involved in, I hate to use the word affirmations because for so many of your viewers that might sound airy fairy, and I
Yeah.
don't mean it that way. But if you can get somebody to flip the switch and say, instead of thinking this way, how
Yeah.
about thinking this way, which is like the exact opposite of what
Right.
the negative mindset or the limiting mindset is, and get them to practice that over and over again, at least for 30 days, you'll see a
Sure.
huge change.
So, like from a mindset perspective, that brings up a question that I always wanted to ask. So I'm going to take it here. So, mindset I'm a black and white thinker, Barb. So I think in like either black or white. I'm learning in my old age that there's some gray involved. But generally speaking, like you just said, there's either a mindset of I can or there's a mindset that I can't. Okay. In my mind,
Mhm.
that's black and white. Is there a middle, like, not that I can or can't, I'll try, I might be able to, I'm going to do better than I can't? I mean, are there different kind of levels of mindset? Because I always feel like it's either I can or I can't. And I'm just curious on your end what you see.
Well, actually, in the realm of a growth mindset, there always is possibility, right?
Okay.
There always is, oh, if I work on this, I can change it. If I start thinking differently, I'll get a different result. So I think there's a lot of gray in between actually, but it
Okay.
looks on the surface like it's so either this or that.
Yep.
Um, but and the only way you get to that in between level is through awareness and practice.
Awareness and practice. Now people are like, all right, I'm okay on the awareness thing, but the practice thing sounds like it takes time.
It
And
does.
we always talk about this every week. Like, I barely have time to make payroll. I have to go sell. I have all these, again, reasons, right?
Uh-huh.
Is mindset changing, mindset shifting? Is that like a full-time job or, how do I approach this one step at a time, I guess is my question.
Well, first it goes back to awareness, finding out what your limiting mindset is, what this
Okay.
limiting self-talk in your head is. Like it's not like I'm not comfortable talking to people about how much money they have, which in sales is a kiss of death if you've got that mindset. How do you qualify your prospect, right? So
Right.
if you've got that as a mindset, if you can track back with help, not can't necessarily do it alone, with somebody like myself, track back, well, where did that stem from in the first place, right? And take on another perspective that it's not that money is the root of all evil. That's using a kind of a silly thing. It's
Sure.
not that it's rude to ask people about money, which is a lot of that is going on in the heads of salespeople. They were taught that from the time they were kids, right?
Right.
That that's what their parents said. It isn't
Yep.
necessarily what I have to buy as a
Yep.
reality, right? Like that. So that's how you start moving people step by step from a
Sure.
fixed mindset to a more open or closed or growth mindset.
Well, and it's funny because like you said, Barb, I was raised where I was told not to talk to strangers.
Right.
That was what I was told as a little kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then all of a sudden I graduate high school and I do a sales job and it's a business development job and I'm supposed to talk to strangers all day, every day. So I mean, we've learned that, or don't talk about politics and money and religion, right? You've maybe not everybody, but boy, a lot of people I talk to, especially in my era, have been taught don't talk about that. But so, like you said, that can be a limiting mindset. That's how you were raised. Now all of a sudden, I'm supposed to talk to you about money, and I run into a lot of sales professionals that don't feel comfortable talking about that. So, is
Exactly.
there a couple of things strategy wise? If somebody's listening and that's one thing that they struggle with is talking about money, what do you suggest for that person listening?
Well, at the risk of sounding salesy, because it just popped in my head that I thought I might mention this. We actually have a CD that enables somebody to, by listening to it, it enables them to actually change the way they're thinking about things, even things that they've been locked in place ever since they were kids. So that's one way to go about it.
Sure.
Um, the other is to face the facts, to be able to see that what I once thought was true is just a truth. It's not the truth.
Okay.
Big difference between the two, right? But it takes having a support system, whether it's a coach like myself or a mentor inside the company, or even your manager who can help a person get over those ways of thinking. But again, it all begins with first you got to know what the thoughts are that are going on inside your head.
Well, and for those of you that don't know, what's a CD? Because I mean, tapes, CDs, 8 tracks. There's young kids nowadays
Oh,
that
right. Oh, yeah, yeah. I forgot.
CDs
That's
are
old
compact
school, isn't
discs,
it? It's
right?
old
Yeah,
school.
exactly. So there used to be these things that are like, I don't know, they look like they were metal, but no, that's that's hilarious. I had to throw that in there.
Thank you.
But yeah,
I
absolutely.
believe we
You
have it digitally now.
Yes, exactly. Well, I was gonna say, good. Okay, we can download that, whatever that means,
Right.
right? Um, but it seems like almost every week now, vulnerability comes up in our discussions on our show. And it's not even by design, it just kind of happens. I mean, it feels like you have to be vulnerable to really start this process.
Yep.
Because if you're saying, I'm fine, I don't have any problems, it's the sales manager. If I had a better territory, if my customers were better, again, back to that blaming thing. Do you find that it's hard for humans to be vulnerable at this stage in their journey, I'll say?
If they have a fixed mindset, it is. Because
Okay.
they're starting from, I like to change the word vulnerability because it's just to a lot of people that don't understand what you and I are actually talking about. They think it
Sure.
means weakness. It means that you're going to cave, that you're going to get
Yeah.
slapped and you're just going to fall over. But that's not what vulnerability is, you well know, isn't at all. It's more about, if I were to replace the words with, I have enough of a sense of me being okay in the world so that I can self improve.
Okay.
Right. So that would be another definition of vulnerability, right? Where I'm willing to see I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
Hey, I can grow. And if I grow, I'll be on the planet a whole lot longer because when we stop growing, we die.
Yeah. Well, and some people really struggle, like you said, Barb. Some people really struggle with that word because my dad said, just rub some dirt on it. I mean, when I'm laying there bleeding, he's like, just get up and rub dirt on it as a kid, in sports or whatever, if the bone's not showing, these weird things that, you try to instill in your kids, and maybe he wasn't even trying to do it, but vulnerability was kind of like that's what when I was growing up, and I'll probably get emails for this, but vulnerability is what girls do, right?
Oh,
And
oh yeah,
and
think I've
so,
heard that.
and it's like, okay, well, here you're a CEO or you're an entrepreneur of a company, whatever. I mean, you can't, my dad would always say, don't let him see you sweat. And it's like, man, I don't get that piece. Now I understand what he was saying, but I don't know why that's such a negative piece of being vulnerable, like you said, being open to change, being open to better understand yourself, that totally changes it. So I appreciate that you shared that. So when we come back from the break, I want to kind of talk about how to retain top talent, how to go
Great.
through from that team's perspective. So we'll be right back.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm hanging out with Barbara Spector, CEO and president at Smart Moves. And we've been talking about sales today, which is so fun for me. And again, if you're interested in double digit growth, then this is the right place. Um, Understanding that that growth comes from a team. And we touched on it earlier, but how do you suggest that companies like they maintain that top talent, they keep it around? Is there some things that you've learned over your time on how to do that?
Absolutely. That's a giant topic, right? And
Yeah.
just for the sake of time, I'll just throw out a couple of tips.
Yeah.
I think it starts with first it starts with understanding who you're looking for, who that person is, and what the job really is,
Yep.
rather than some ancient job description that hasn't been updated for 10 years, right?
Right.
Uh, from there, using some pre-employment tests, I think they're super duper important because they create a level of objectivity that the average hiring manager doesn't have, right? The average person, including yours truly, we tend to go with our gut. We have our personal biases and we hire the wrong people for the wrong reason. And when
Yeah.
we're lucky, 50% of the time we'll hire the right person. So now we've got somebody, let's imagine we've hired someone that has the potential to be fantastic. Very first thing that has to happen is you got to onboard that person, right? And onboarding isn't here's your phone, here's your desk, go get them, kid way of doing things. It isn't even a 2 day, 3 day, 2 week orientation. It
Yeah.
really should be for salespeople. It really should be a 90-day process
Sure.
wherein you're going through all the things that they have to learn about the company, about the product, about selling, and then it's a matter of continuing to reinforce what they've learned, understand what problems they're having, and in addition to onboarding, and maybe part of it is to do what I call stay interviews. What's going to keep you staying here? And what would make you leave? So that you can have so that the leaders can have touch points maybe every month or two
Yeah.
and say, okay, how are we doing? You said you needed this, and this in order to have job satisfaction and feel fully engaged. How are we doing? What else can we
Sure.
do for you? What else can we change? Because if they wait till the end and then they have an exit interview at the end, it's way too late. Right?
Yeah.
The other
Oh,
thing that
that's
has to go into it is the manager. I don't care whether it's at a sales organization or any other, that manager has got to be able to have his own head on straight. He has to be able to hold people accountable for results without being a bully.
Yep.
He has to be able to coach people on an ongoing basis, at least once a week. And to be able to help them understand how that person's motivated, because we're not all motivated the same way.
Yeah, wow, there's so much there. So I want to go all the way back to your beginning about the job description. We'll kind of walk through those because I think there's some really solid information there. So, like you said, if that job description's 10 years old, I mean, boy, it's probably needs a fixing.
Oh
Um,
boy.
I'm seeing job descriptions where they're more, hopefully they're more about the kind of person that they're looking for rather than the skills that they're looking for,
Mhm.
right? Because it's kind of like the resumes. Back in the day, resumes were, there's a little paragraph about your objective, and then there's all your job duties that you've been at your whole career. And then at the bottom, there's a little thing, references or education or whatever. It doesn't tell us anything about the type of person. So do you think like, culture is an important thing, expectations of the client, different things like that are should be in that job description? What are some new things you're seeing that should be in job descriptions, I guess, here,
Okay.
Barb?
Great question. I definitely agree with you on that. But the other thing, I think there's two different documents that have to be produced. One is a job description that actually takes into account the things you were just describing,
Mhm.
as well as the key 6 or 8 KPIs, performance objectives, expectations of what this person needs to do, not have. I
Yeah,
don't care if they have 10 years of sales experience. I want to know what they accomplished with those 10 years of
sure.
sales experience.
Yep,
So the job is so we build a job description that speaks to who the person needs to be, as you were talking
yep,
about, as well as
yeah,
what do they need to do. And then we write ads. The ad is the where the rubber meets the road. We've got to write an ad where the very first thing that we're talking about is what's in it for the candidate to
right.
come on board with us.
Yeah,
Most ads start out with, "Oh, we're a family-owned business and we've been in business for 20 years and blah 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 blah." Do you think that the
yeah,
candidate cares? They only care about what's
yep,
in it for them.
yeah.
So start there.
That's Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes complete sense. I think that the job description is kind of like a dating ad, right? I mean, people are either going to be interested in it or not, and you get one shot at this. And I've
That's
seen
right.
some really weak job descriptions, some want ads, we'll call them whatever, that just did not do justice. I don't know where AI fits into all this. I don't understand all that stuff. And I'm sure that moving forward, there's going to be computers writing these grandiose job descriptions for us so that we won't have to. But like you said, if we're not really understanding the type of person that this is, and I don't know about you, but when I help my clients, I figure like a third of our decisions based on the assessment that we have them take, a third is based on their interviewing, and then a third is based on their resume. But it starts at that job description. So do you guys at Smart Moves, do you help people with that, or is that not something that you guys do?
We definitely do. Although we're not recruiters, we don't do the sourcing of candidates, but we
Sure,
help them totally revamp, revise, improve, enhance their their current job description, bring it up to date, and then we actually help them to write the ad, where we write the ad for them with their input, of course. It's
sure.
absolutely an essential piece of the equation. Absolutely.
Yeah, and especially in today's job market, right? I mean, it's
Oh,
so tight, and so to get a solid candidate because you had a poor ad is probably not likely. The better the ad, the more people that you're going to get to actually respond. So, to your point, then, if you then have a pre-employment piece, explain that pre-employment. It's a hard word to say. Pre-employment that you were talking about, Barb. What does that mean for you?
oh, you mean in terms of assessment?
Yeah,
Yeah. So again, I use a very powerful as long as we're talking about sales, I use a very powerful sales assessment that only speaks to sales competency, right?
Yeah.
And so, apropos of your point in terms of who this person is, also, here's some of the things that we just measured for a particular client.
Sure.
We can do a differentiation analysis before we ever unleash a sales assessment, so we know what the top performers have that the bottom don't.
Okay.
That makes sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we learned about a group of top performers in this company that the bottom people didn't do or didn't have is the
Mhm.
top were able to get referrals from customers. They were great at scheduling those first meetings. They asked enough questions. They were easily able to discuss finance, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
Sure. Yeah.
They quickly develop rapport. They get the first call from the customer when the customer is looking to maybe buy another product, and they go to them first to say, hey, do you have this by any chance?
Yeah.
They focus on value over price, and they're not compelled to present. And what that means is that salespeople are all great at presenting because it's easy. They
Hmm.
don't have to listen. They don't have to ask better questions. They can just
Yep.
show up and throw up, is what I like to
Yep.
call it.
Yep.
Which is also the reason that win rates are so low, because they can't
Yeah,
close
for
if all
sure.
they do is present. So,
Right.
so back to your question about assessments, if we can understand what the company, what's needed and wanted in an organization by identifying that upfront and first, then the assessment creates it's just like this evaluation I was talking about with an existing team. We're going to get a gigantic piece of objective data that has no bias in it, that isn't
Hmm.
subjective, and that becomes your first step in hiring people, meant to be used early in your hiring process, not later
Okay.
after you've already fallen in love with the candidate for the wrong reason.
Yeah. Yep.
Did
Wow.
I answer your question?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I think it's funny because, especially in our industry, or where I can interview and I can tell you that, you know what, I can sell ice to Eskimos. And how in the world are you going to tell if I can't or if I can? So
Mm-hmm.
I sell you at that interview, you fall in love with me. I'm like totally bluffing because I can't sell a hot dog to a starving man, but you don't know it until 6 to 9, maybe even 12 months in, right?
Right.
So now we're stuck because we got this guy or girl person and they're in the wrong spot. They cannot do what they said they were going to do. So then we try to fit the round peg in the square
The square
hole,
hole.
right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, now we're complaining, we're mad, we're disappointed, but yet we didn't set it up right. So the job description, the pre-employment assessment, those two things are critical in that, right?
Absolutely.
And so then you jumped into the third one. So let's say we hire them, and now there's this onboarding process. And I think it's so funny. The average onboarding is, here's the restroom, here's where you park, here's your computer, here's the passwords if you're lucky. All right. And then, hey man, if you're super lucky, we're going to go to lunch with the CEO at today at noon, right? That's like your onboarding, and HR's down the street if you need them or whatever. So when you're
Right.
talking about 90 days, that's a really surprising number for some people listening.
Mm-hmm.
So look, I mean, do you have like benchmarks along the way for that 90 days that you have for these people to make sure that they're in alignment?
Absolutely. So the first month is where the heavy lifting takes place, where
Okay.
they're all the information that they need, all the people that they need to meet, all the
Yeah.
training they need to do takes place. And what happens in month two and month three, over the course of maybe once a week or as often as needed, is
Sure.
there's going to be a touch point where the sales manager is out doing calls with the individual. Then they're doing having feedback and coaching sessions afterwards. Then the salesperson goes out and does his own thing without any help. right? And then there's feedback after he or she returns. And this becomes
Hmm.
an ongoing process in month 2 and in month 3, so
Yeah,
that so that what you expected and what you told the salesperson they needed to do in month 1, you're inspecting and in month 2 and month 3 and helping them to grow even more as they go along. So it's
sure.
not like
Yeah,
3 months of, hands-on micromanaging the person.
yeah.
No, no, no.
Well, and so then you get into the fourth one where you're talking about your stay interview. And I don't know why it is that we're so fearful of asking those questions that you just talked about. What's not going well? What can we do better? What's making you stay up at night? I mean, these questions that we should just be kind of like second nature to us as leaders, because again, we want these people to be as successful as possible, and we as leaders have such a strong play in that. I feel like sometimes people are afraid of the answer. Is that why we're not asking that question? Are leaders that afraid of what they're going to say in that type of stay interview? Why are we not doing this more, Barb?
I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of one aspect, and I think there's at least another one or maybe two.
Okay.
The second is they don't know how to ask great questions.
Okay.
And part of why they don't know so just like they don't know how to teach their salespeople to ask great questions, they don't know how to ask great questions, right?
Sure.
So they're nervous about that. But the other thing is that there's a lack of empathy, right? So that if they were to put them, here's what I mean. If they were to put themselves and think about putting themselves in the shoes of that salesperson and say, if I were on the job now for a month and a half, what would I be concerned about? How would I be feeling? And if
Yeah.
they can just flip over what it would be for them and ask it as a question to that salesperson, it will make a huge difference. And your point is absolutely accurate. A lot of them are afraid of what they're going to hear because they may not be able to deliver it. But
Wow.
but that should have been asked a lot sooner,
Right?
actually.
Yeah. Exactly. Little late to ask if you want kids after you're married.
Right,
So, yeah,
exactly.
which makes total sense. But I think that people are literally I think that they're afraid. We do a ton of customer experience training to improve customers' experiences. And it seems like leadership, companies in general are afraid to ask the question. Like if somebody has a bad experience at their restaurant, let's say, they're scared to death that somebody's going to want free food for life. They're going to want to be part owner of the company. I mean, they're so afraid of what's going to happen. It's better not to ask. Like, how was your dinner? It's better not to ask because I'm afraid of the answer, right? Because they might
Mhm,
take advantage of me.
mhm.
And I just think that it shows such low visibility for looking long term because, yeah, they might be happy today, but if you're missing something in 6 months and you don't ask, if you have high turnover, I'm guessing if you see high turnover, that probably is one of those indicators right there. I'm guessing, correct?
Absolutely. And as you were talking, I was thinking about a situation where a company was using this type of a concept and asking people, a month later, how's it going? What are you happy? What can we do to make you more happy? And I said to
Yeah,
them, so if the person says they need something that's really completely unrealistic, you should need to ask the question anyway. Then you come back with another question, which is,
yeah,
well, thanks for saying that, but if we
yeah,
can't give that to you, what else could we do? Right?
yeah,
It's like
right.
finding alternatives.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
They're afraid we're going to ask for a double salary. I want to triple my salary. I want a company
exactly.
car, unlimited expense account. I don't know what we're afraid of, but it's that unknown that it's like,
Yep.
hey, we're probably better off not asking the
I
question,
hear
right?
you loud and clear.
Yeah. And then the last one that you mentioned was, kind of the leadership and being accountable, having accountability and coaching. And I think, where in the world would our athletes be today if they didn't have coaches, right?
Exactly.
And so, thinking that somebody can go through all of these and then you kind of stop after the stay interview, there's coaching that's going on. I don't know why, but sales organizations all over the world, they just love product training. I mean, you can
Oh
just,
yeah.
product train like crazy, right? But they don't want to sales train, or they don't want to do the listening skills. They don't want to talk about the, ways to question. They don't do that nearly as much as the product training. And
That's
I'm
right.
just curious, do you see that in your world, that it's a lot of product training and not a lot of soft skills, I'll call it?
Absolutely. I totally, totally. And again, it goes back to what people are comfortable with, right? And if there's something that they haven't been able to do really well, a manager hasn't been able to do coaching well, they don't understand how to go about it, they're going to avoid it and just do product training. And product training is the same as a salesperson presenting. That's the easy part of the job. But it's but,
Yeah.
but being able to ask those tough questions is so important, so important. But
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because the reality is if you don't, somebody else will. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the sad part, right? Is when if your company, if you're nervous about your best salesperson getting pilfered away, if you're seeing high turnover, I just think it's, again, you can easily blame them. You can blame your competitor, but I like looking inward and going, what in the world am I doing wrong here? And I'm assuming that's where Smart Moves comes in, is to kind of really coach that sales team, coach that leadership team to be able to speak for themselves? Eventually, do the training wheels come off? Is Smart Moves move on, so to speak, or how does that look?
Yeah, so we do individual training and coaching with the sales
Okay.
leaders on coaching, on how to
Okay.
hold them accountable, on pipeline management, for example, all of that stuff. In the meantime, the salespeople are getting trained in similar, but not necessarily the exact same things. So if we can, and we do a ton of role playing so that they can hear themselves, and with feedback from us, we actually interrupt them in the middle, and we ask permission first to do that.
Yeah.
But we'll
Yeah.
interrupt them and say, oh, let's rewind. You just asked three questions. We want you to ask one at a time. There's just a silly example, right?
Right.
Or did you really listen to what their answer was? Because what I'm seeing happening that blows my mind is the shallowness of the questions that sales leaders oftentimes ask, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like they're checking boxes
Yeah.
instead of really hearing the
Sure.
problem or the situation that's being presented by the salesperson, right? So
Yeah.
there's no continuity to the questions. They're not, one question isn't following the next to a conclusion. It's like they're separate. This issue is this issue, and this issue is this issue, and this issue is this issue.
Well, that's so cool. Well, as we land the plane today, I want to make sure for the people listening, if any of this is you know, like hitting a nerve, that's good, because that probably means that some type of tweaking might need to be done in your organization. And I'd love for you to check in with Barb, and we'll give you info at the end on how to do that. But for this question, the last one here, Barb, is what would your tip of the day be for somebody listening? Maybe it's something we covered already, but maybe there's something burning in your heart that somebody needs to hear from you. So
Interesting.
have at it as what your tip of the day would be.
Okay, I am going to give you all just say a phrase that I really want you to take to heart. This is true for salespeople, sales managers, sales leaders, you and me. People don't care about how much you know until they feel how much you care.
Yeah, that's so true, right?
Yeah.
Well, and for high D people or high C people that are fact based, that just kind of is like that was on a chalkboard right now.
Right.
Oh,
Exactly.
exactly. So, but it's so true that, and that's, our team is made up of people. That's why I said that. And I keep trying to tell people, hey, it's not just a machine that you're just having to oil or tighten a nut or bolt down here occasionally. These are people that have families and lives, and they drove in today and they spilled coffee on themselves today. I mean, this is all the people that we're dealing with. So thank you so much for sharing that tip. So if somebody does want to get in contact with Smart Moves, they want to connect with you, Barb, from something that we talked about today, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
So I've created a simple URL so it's easier to remember. It's VIPchatwithbarb.com.
VIPchatwithbarb.com. Awesome. And then there they just kind of will be able to connect with you. And so again, if you're listening, we do this every week for you to be able to hopefully give you some answers on something you're struggling with. Maybe this was a huge blind spot for you today. Maybe there was some things that, resonated with you. If there was one thing that you can take away from this, listen to that, just kind of sit with that one thing, and if you need to, jump on Barb's website, connect with her on LinkedIn, find her and help yourself rather than just jump into your next thing that you're going to do today. Really just sit with it because this was revelatory to think about double digit top line growth, thinking about how to retain your team. I mean, there's just so much good stuff here. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, Barb. And I just can't wait to keep learning from you and from Smart Moves.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you.